My name is Nathan Cooper. I'm 32 years old, and until last year, I was a rising star at the district attorney's office in Boston. I had everything figured out. Great career, wonderful fiancé, and what I thought was a supportive family. Then my sister committed a crime that changed everything, and my parents demanded I sacrifice my entire future to cover it up. I chose truth over family, and watched my world burn to ashes. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to follow my journey. I grew up in Lexington, a nice suburban town about 15 miles northwest of Boston. My parents, Richard and Martha Cooper, created what looked like the perfect middle-class life from the outside. Dad worked as a bank manager, Mom taught high school English, and we lived in a colonial-style house with a well-maintained lawn and flower beds that Mom proudly tended every weekend. But appearances can be deceiving. From my earliest memories, there was always a clear favorite in our household, and it wasn't me. My younger sister, Allison, was born when I was 4 years old, and from that moment on, she became the center of my parents' universe. While they certainly provided for my basic needs, the emotional investment clearly tilted in her direction. Allison just needs a little extra attention, Mom would explain whenever I questioned the imbalance. She's more sensitive than you are, Nathan. You're so self-sufficient. And I was self-sufficient largely because I had to be. When it came time for college, I worked multiple jobs to supplement my partial scholarship while maintaining a perfect GPA. Meanwhile, Allison dropped out of 3 different universities each time, with my parents covering the wasted tuition without complaint. College isn't for everyone. Dad would shrug whenever I expressed frustration at the double standard. Allison is just trying to find her path. By the time I finished law school, Allison had cycled through 6 different jobs, from retail to restaurant work to a brief stint as a yoga instructor. None lasted more than 6 months. Each time she quit or got fired, my parents would cover her rent until she found something new. When she totaled her first car after texting while driving, they bought her a new one without hesitation. When she racked up credit card debt, they paid it off without question. All while telling me how proud they were that I never asked for help. Despite the obvious favoritism, I kept trying to maintain family harmony. I visited for Sunday dinners when my schedule allowed. I remembered birthdays and anniversaries with thoughtful gifts. I genuinely hoped that my professional success would eventually earn their respect and equal treatment. After passing the bar exam, I landed a position as an assistant district attorney in Boston. The hours were long and the pay wasn't great compared to private firms, but I loved the work. I believed in justice and in holding people accountable for their actions. Over 5 years, I built a solid reputation handling increasingly important cases, primarily focusing on financial crimes and fraud. My personal life took a positive turn when I met Caroline Walsh, a pediatric nurse I encountered during a case involving a child witness. With her warm smile and no-nonsense approach to life, Caroline brought balance to my intense work schedule. After 2 years of dating, I proposed on a weekend trip to Cape Cod. We set a date for a fall wedding and started saving for our first home together. Everything seemed to be falling into place professionally as well. My mentor, Deputy District Attorney James Harrington, had taken a special interest in my career. He assigned me to several high-profile fraud cases that received substantial media attention when we secured convictions. "You've got the makings of an excellent prosecutor," Nathan Harrington told me one evening as we reviewed case notes. "Keep this trajectory, and you'll be sitting in my chair someday." Last spring, when rumors circulated about an upcoming senior prosecutor position, Harrington pulled me aside. "I've recommended you for the promotion," he said. "The official announcement won't come for another month, but between us it's looking very good." That weekend, Caroline suggested we celebrate with my family. "They should know how well you're doing," she insisted. "This is a big deal, Nathan." So we invited my parents and Allison to dinner at an upscale restaurant in the city. My parents seemed genuinely pleased as I shared the news about my likely promotion. My father ordered an expensive bottle of wine for the table. "To Nathan," he said, raising his glass, "we always knew you'd do well for yourself." It was one of the rare moments when I felt truly valued by my family. But the feeling didn't last long. As the evening progressed, I noticed Allison becoming increasingly quiet, occasionally checking her phone under the table. When the conversation continued to revolve around my career and upcoming wedding plans, she abruptly excused herself to use the restroom. Caroline followed a few minutes later, returning alone with a concerned expression. "Is Allison okay?" I asked. "She seemed upset," Caroline whispered. "When I asked if she was all right, she just said something about always being in your shadow." My mother overheard and immediately jumped to Allison's defense. "It's not easy being the younger sibling of someone so accomplished," she said with a pointed look at me, as if Allison's feelings were somehow my fault. "We should change the subject when she comes back." And just like that, my moment of recognition was over. The remainder of dinner focused on neutral topics and Allison's latest interest in becoming a social media influencer. My parents listened with rapt attention as she detailed her plans for brand partnerships and content creation, despite her having no followers or experience. Driving home, Caroline squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you even if they struggle to show it properly," she said gently. "Thanks," I replied, trying to hide my disappointment. "It's fine. I'm used to it." But deep down, a part of me still hoped that professional success would finally earn me the same unconditional support they had always given Allison. That hope was completely shattered just 3 weeks later, with a single phone call in the middle of the night. The shrill ring of my cell phone cut through the darkness at 2:15 in the morning. Caroline stirred beside me as I fumbled for the device on my nightstand. "Hello," I answered grudgingly. "Nathan." My sister's voice came through in broken sobs. "I need help. Please, I really messed up." I sat up immediately, fully awake now. "Allison, what happened? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm at Mom and Dad's. You need to come over." "Please, Nathan. It's really bad." "Tell me what happened," I insisted, already getting out of bed. "I can't explain on the phone. Please just come. Mom and Dad said to get you here right away." Caroline was sitting up now, concern etched across her face. "What's going on?" "I don't know. Something with Allison. She's at my parents' house and sounds hysterical." I pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt. "I'm sorry, but I need to go over there." "I'm coming with you," Caroline said firmly, already reaching for her clothes. 20 minutes later, we pulled into my parents' driveway in Lexington. All the lights in the house were on unusual for nearly 3 in the morning. My father opened the door before we could even knock, his face ashen. "Thank God you're here," he said, ushering us inside. The scene in the living room was chaotic. My mother sat on the couch with her arm around Allison, who was sobbing uncontrollably. Tissues and half-empty mugs of tea littered the coffee table. The local news played on the television with the volume turned low. "What happened?" I asked, looking between them. My mother looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "There's been an accident." "Accident? Is everyone okay?" My father closed the living room door and lowered his voice. "Allison was driving home from a party tonight. She had been drinking." A sense of dread began forming in the pit of my stomach. "And she hit someone," my father continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "A pedestrian. She panicked and drove away." The room seemed to tilt slightly as I processed his words. I looked at Allison, who couldn't meet my eyes. "You hit someone and left the scene?" I asked her directly. She nodded, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "The car is in the garage," my father added. "The front end is damaged. There's blood on the bumper." Caroline gasped beside me. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Who did you hit? Are they alive?" I demanded. My mother reached for the remote and turned up the volume on the television. A reporter stood outside a hospital emergency entrance. "Police are searching for the driver of a vehicle that struck 34-year-old Miguel Rodriguez as he was walking home from his late shift at Massachusetts General Hospital," the reporter said. "Rodriguez, a father of 2 young children, is currently in critical condition. Witnesses report the vehicle fled the scene immediately after the collision." "Oh my God," I whispered, sinking into a chair. "Allison, what have you done?" "It was an accident," she wailed. "I didn't see him until it was too late. I was scared." My training as a prosecutor immediately kicked in. "You need to get a lawyer right now. Leaving the scene of an accident with personal injury is a felony. The sooner you come forward, the better it will look for you." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We've been discussing this for the past hour," my father said carefully. and we think there might be another approach." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling about where this was heading. "Nathan, you work in the district attorney's office," my mother said, as if I needed reminding. "You have access to information about the investigation." I stared at them in disbelief. "Are you suggesting I use my position to interfere with a hit-and-run investigation?" "Not interfere," my father said quickly. "Just keep us informed about what the police know, whether they have any leads, if they're close to identifying Allison." Caroline placed her hand on my arm, a silent warning. I knew she was right to be concerned. Even accessing case information for personal reasons could be an ethics violation. "I can't do that," I said firmly. "It would be a conflict of interest. I'd need to disclose that my sister is involved." "You can't do that," my mother exclaimed. "It would ruin her life." "She hit someone and left them bleeding in the street," I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. "That decision may have already ruined her life, and possibly ended someone else's." Allison's sobs intensified. My father pulled me aside into the kitchen. "Nathan, be reasonable," he urged in a low voice. "We don't even know if they have any leads yet. All we're asking is that you find out if Allison is already a suspect before we make any decisions." I ran my hands through my hair, feeling trapped. "Dad, this is exactly the kind of situation where I should recuse myself completely." "This is your sister we're talking about," he hissed. "Your family. Are you really going to throw her to the wolves without even knowing what evidence they have?" After nearly an hour of back and forth, exhausted and conflicted, I reluctantly agreed to discreetly check if there were any leads in the case. Nothing more. I made it clear this would be a one-time exception solely to understand the situation before they retained proper legal counsel. As dawn broke, Caroline and I finally left. She had been mostly silent throughout the discussion, but once we were in the car, she turned to me. "Nathan, you know you can't get involved in this," she said quietly. "Your entire career would be at risk." I know, I sighed. "I just need to find out how strong the case is against her. Then I'll convince them she needs to come forward voluntarily with a lawyer." Caroline didn't seem convinced, but she squeezed my hand supportively. "Just be careful. This feels like it could spiral quickly." She had no idea how right she was. The next day at work, fighting exhaustion, I cautiously inquired about recent hit-and-run cases. My colleague in the traffic division mentioned the Rodriguez case. "Nasty business," he said. "Guy's fighting for his life. 2 kids might lose their father. We've got a witness who caught a partial plate, though. Should have the bastard soon enough." My blood ran cold. "A partial plate." He nodded. "First 3 digits match about 200 vehicles in the greater Boston area. They're working through the list now, focusing on cars with front-end damage." I thanked him and returned to my office feeling sick. Allison's license plate would be on that list. It was only a matter of time. 2 days later, my parents called an emergency family meeting. Carolyn offered to come with me, but I insisted she stay home. "I need to handle this myself," I told her, not wanting to further entangle her in the situation. When I arrived at my parents' house, I immediately sensed an escalation in tension. My father paced the living room while my mother sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa. Allison looked pale but strangely calm compared to her hysterics from the previous visit. "The police came by the body shop, where I take my car," my father said without preamble. "They're checking all repair shops for recently damaged vehicles matching the description." "I told you they would," I replied. "This is a serious investigation. The victim is a hospital employee with a family. There's media coverage. They're going to be thorough." "What else do you know?" my mother demanded. I hesitated, then shared what I had learned. "They have paint samples from the scene that narrow down the color and make of the car, and they have a partial plate number that matches Allison's." Allison began to cry again, but it seemed more controlled than before, almost performative. My father stopped pacing and sat down heavily beside my mother. "We need $50,000, he announced. "Excuse me." "For Gerald Hoffman," my father clarified. "He's the best criminal defense attorney in Massachusetts. He handles high-profile cases like this and gets results." $50,000 is just the retainer," my mother added. "You're the only one in the family who has that kind of money saved." I stared at them in disbelief. You expect me to pay $50,000 for Allison's defense money that Caroline and I have been saving for our future. This is an emergency, Nathan, my mother said sharply. After all, we sacrificed for your education, all those years of supporting you through law school. Supporting me, I couldn't help but laugh. I worked 3 jobs and took out student loans. You didn't pay a dime for my law degree. We gave you a stable home, my father countered. We raised you with advantages Allison never had. I shook my head incredulous at the rewriting of history. What advantages? She got new cars and paid tuition while I worked for everything I have. Blood is thicker than water, Nathan, my father said ominously. Family stands together in times of crisis. The conversation grew more intense as they outlined additional expectations. Not only did they want me to drain my savings, but they also expected me to use my position to gain access to evidence in the case. You could find out exactly what they have, my mother suggested. Maybe some evidence could get lost along the way. Are you actually asking me to tamper with evidence? I was aghast. That's a felony. I would lose my law license, go to prison, and destroy my entire life. Your sister's life is at stake, my father countered. Because of her choices, I snapped. She chose to drink and drive. She chose to flee the scene instead of calling for help. Allison finally spoke up, her voice, small but with an undercurrent of entitlement I'd heard many times before. It was an accident, Nathan. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Why are you being so cruel? I left that meeting with a pounding headache and a growing sense of dread. The expectations being placed on me were not only unreasonable but potentially criminal, yet the guilt trips and emotional manipulation were taking their toll. Over the next few days, I struggled to focus at work. Cases piled up on my desk. I missed a filing deadline and received a concerned email from Harrington. The promotion I had been all but promised now seemed to be slipping away as my performance suffered. Caroline noticed the change in me. One night after I snapped at her over something trivial, she confronted me. "You've been distant ever since Allison's accident," she said. "You barely sleep, you're irritable, and you won't talk to me about what's happening. We're supposed to be partners, Nathan." "I'm handling it," I insisted. "Are you? Because it seems like it's handling you." We had our first serious argument that night. I couldn't tell Caroline the full extent of what my family was asking of me without potentially making her an accessory after the fact. The legal implications created a wall between us just when I needed her support most. Meanwhile, the victim's condition worsened. Miguel Rodriguez had been placed in a medically induced coma due to brain swelling. Local news covered candlelight vigils held by his co-workers at the hospital. His wife Elena made tearful pleas for the driver to come forward. The hit-and-run investigation became a major story in Boston, with updates featured prominently in daily newscasts. The public was outraged that someone would leave a father of 2 young children dying in the street. My anxiety reached new heights when my supervisor assigned me to collaborate with the traffic division on a different case. I would be working alongside the very detectives investigating my sister's crime. That evening, my parents showed up unannounced at my apartment. Fortunately, Caroline was working a night shift at the hospital. "We've figured it out," my father said excitedly, as I reluctantly let them in. "We have proof Allison wasn't driving." "What are you talking about?" My mother pulled out a folder. "We found these photos on Facebook. Allison's ex-boyfriend Ryan was at the same party that night. He drives a similar car. We can say he borrowed Allison's car and was the one driving." I flipped through the printouts, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. You want to frame an innocent person for a crime Allison committed. "Ryan has a previous DUI," my father pointed out, as if this justified the plan. "The police will believe he was the driver. All you need to do is make sure this information gets to the right detective." I closed the folder and handed it back. "This is a new low even for you two. I won't be part of framing an innocent man." Then the $50,000 my mother pressed. "We need it by Monday. The lawyer won't wait." I showed them to the door. "I need time to think." But I already knew what I had to do. I just wasn't ready to accept the consequences. The next morning I called in sick to work for the first time in my career. Instead of going to the office, I drove to Massachusetts General Hospital. I told myself I just wanted to understand more about Miguel Rodriguez, the man my sister had hit, but deep down I knew I was seeking moral clarity. I sat in the hospital cafeteria for nearly an hour watching staff come and go. Eventually, I made my way to the intensive care unit waiting area. A small group of people huddled together in one corner, speaking quietly in Spanish. A woman in her early 30s sat slightly apart, staring blankly at a children's book in her hands. From news reports, I recognized her as Elena Rodriguez Miguel's wife. 2 young children, a boy about 7 and a girl, perhaps 4, colored quietly on the floor nearby. Occasionally, the little girl would look up at her mother with confusion and concern beyond her years. A doctor emerged from the ICU and approached Elena. I couldn't hear their conversation, but her body language told me everything. No improvement. Maybe worse news. She nodded stoically until the doctor left, then covered her face with her hands. The little boy noticed and went to his mother, putting his small arms around her shoulders. The sight broke something inside me. These children might grow up without their father because my sister couldn't be bothered to call an ambulance after hitting him. I left the hospital with renewed determination. That evening, I drove to Allison's apartment to confront her directly without our parents' interference. "You need to tell me exactly what happened that night," I said after she reluctantly let me in. "The complete truth." "I already told you," she said defensively. "It was an accident." "Were you texting?" I asked point blank. "In addition to driving drunk?" Her eyes widened slightly before she looked away. "Maybe. I don't remember exactly." "So you were drunk texting while driving, hit a man and left him to die in the street," I summarized bluntly. "And now our parents want me to destroy my career and possibly go to prison to protect you." "They're just trying to help," she said weakly. "No, they're enabling you just like they always have. But this isn't about maxing out a credit card or dropping out of college. A man might die, Allison. His children might grow up without a father." For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine remorse cross her face, but it quickly hardened into something more familiar: self-preservation. "What do you want me to do, Nathan? Turn myself in, go to prison? My life would be over." "Miguel Rodriguez's life might be over," I countered. "Actions have consequences. It's time you finally faced some." Later that week, my parents escalated their pressure campaign. The $50,000 demand became immediate as they placed a deposit with the fixer lawyer they'd contacted. "He can make this go away," my father insisted during yet another tense family meeting, "but he needs the full retainer by tomorrow." "I don't have liquid cash like that," I explained. "It's in retirement accounts, our house down payment fund. I can't just withdraw it without penalties." "Figure it out," my mother snapped. "This is your sister's future we're talking about." The conversation grew more disturbing as they outlined additional strategies the lawyer had suggested, including having me plant evidence implicating someone else. I left their house that night feeling physically ill. At work, my mentor James Harrington noticed my distraction and called me into his office. "Whatever's going on with you, Nathan, it's affecting your work," he said with genuine concern. "If you need help, personal or professional, my door is always open." I nearly broke down and told him everything right then. Instead, I mumbled something about wedding stress and promised to refocus. That night, I found myself thinking about Professor Eleanor Winters from my law school ethics class. Moral courage isn't about the easy calls, she used to say. It's about doing the right thing when every fiber of your being screams for the easy way out. When I returned to my apartment that evening, I found Caroline sitting at the kitchen table with my hastily scribbled notes about the Rodriguez case spread out before her. "What is this?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes betraying hurt and confusion. "Why do you have notes about the hit-and-run case that's all over the news?" I couldn't lie to her anymore. I told her everything my sister had done and what my parents were asking of me. "They want you to pay $50,000 and compromise evidence," she asked incredulously. "That's insane, Nathan. You'd be throwing away everything you've worked for." "They're my family," I said weakly. "And what am I?" Caroline demanded, tears filling her eyes. "What about our future together? The home we've been saving for? The life we're building?" "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Yes, you do," she said firmly. "You just don't want to do it because it's hard." Our argument escalated with Caroline eventually grabbing her coat and storming out. "Figure out what kind of man you really are, Nathan," she said from the doorway, "because right now I don't recognize you." The following day, searching for perspective, I drove to my childhood home while my parents were at work. Using the spare key they still kept under a flower pot, I let myself in and wandered through the house looking at old photographs. In my old bedroom, now converted to a home office, I found a box of my childhood mementos. Among them was an essay I'd written in 8th grade about wanting to become a prosecutor. "I want to make sure people who break the law face consequences," my 13-year-old self had written. "I believe in justice and fairness for everyone." When had I lost sight of that clarity? When had I started considering compromising everything I believed in? I made one final attempt to understand the full impact of Allison's actions by scheduling a meeting with Miguel's doctor, introducing myself only as an attorney interested in the case. He explained the extent of the injuries: multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and traumatic brain injury. Even if Miguel survived, he might never walk again. He would likely suffer cognitive impairments. His life as he knew it was over. That evening, my parents invited me to dinner, promising a reasonable discussion about next steps. When I arrived, I found they had invited Allison as well. My father poured wine as if we were celebrating rather than discussing a potential felony. "We've spoken with the attorney again," my father began. "He suggested that given your position, you might be able to influence which evidence gets priority in the investigation." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "The paint samples from the scene," my mother explained calmly, as if discussing a minor traffic ticket. "If they were to go missing from the evidence room, the case against Allison would be much weaker." "You're asking me to steal evidence," I said flatly. "We're asking you to help your sister," my father corrected. "Like we've always helped you." Something snapped inside me. Years of resentment coupled with the moral weight of the current situation came pouring out. "When have you ever helped me?" I demanded, my voice rising. "You've spent my entire life favoring Allison, making excuses for her, cleaning up her messes. You never held her accountable for anything, and look where that's gotten her. She nearly killed a man and left him to die in the street, and your solution is to commit more crimes to cover it up." "Nathan," my mother warned, glancing nervously at the open windows. "No, I'm done," I continued, standing up from the table. "This ends now. I won't destroy my life, my career, and my relationship with Caroline to protect Allison from the consequences of her actions. Not this time. If you walk out that door," my father said coldly, "you're choosing strangers over your own blood." I looked at each of them, these people who shared my DNA but suddenly felt like strangers themselves. "I'm choosing justice," I replied. "I'm choosing the truth. I'm choosing to be someone who can look at himself in the mirror. Maybe it's time you all tried doing the same." I walked out, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. I spent that night in my office, staring at the Massachusetts Rules of Professional Conduct that hung framed on my wall. As an officer of the court, I had an ethical obligation to report knowledge of a crime. As a prosecutor, I had sworn to uphold justice. As a son and brother, I felt pulled in the opposite direction. Around midnight, I called Caroline. "I know what I have to do," I told her when she answered. "I should have done it from the beginning." "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice gentle despite our recent argument. "If I compromise on this, I wouldn't be the man you agreed to marry," I said. "I wouldn't be the man I want to be." "Whatever happens," she promised, "we'll face it together." The next morning, I requested one final meeting with my parents and Allison. We gathered in my parents' living room, the tension palpable. "I've made my decision," I announced. "I'm giving you one chance to do the right thing. Allison needs to retain an attorney and voluntarily come forward today. I'll do everything I legally can to help her navigate the process, but I won't cross ethical lines." "We've been through this," my father dismissed. "That's not an option." "Then you leave me no choice," I said quietly. "If Allison doesn't turn herself in by 5 o'clock today, I will report what I know to the proper authorities." The room exploded in outrage. My mother began crying. My father turned red with anger. Allison stared at me with naked hatred. "We already took care of it," my mother said between sobs. "We told the police Allison was home with us all night. We gave her an alibi." I closed my eyes, briefly absorbing this new information. You've just admitted to lying to the police in an ongoing investigation. That's another crime. You would really betray your own family, my father demanded. You're asking me to betray everything else I believe in, I replied. My answer is no. I left them with the deadline and drove straight to my office. My first step was to formally recuse myself from any involvement with the case. I scheduled an immediate meeting with my direct supervisor. I need to disclose a conflict of interest, I began, once we were behind closed doors. The hit-and-run case involving Miguel Rodriguez. I have reason to believe my sister was the driver. His expression shifted from confusion to shock. Nathan, are you certain about this? Yes, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I've been struggling with this information for days, which explains my recent performance issues. I should have come forward immediately, and I accept any consequences for that delay. After a lengthy discussion about my ethical obligations, I was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. I then met with the detectives handling the case and provided a formal statement detailing Allison's confession and the evidence I was aware of. That evening I watched from my apartment window as 2 police cruisers pulled up outside. Caroline held my hand as I made the hardest phone call of my life. Dad, the police are here, I said when he answered. I've given them a statement. They're coming to arrest Allison. You're no longer our son, he replied before hanging up. The media explosion was immediate and brutal. Prosecutor turns in own sister. For hit and run, screamed the headlines. My phone began ringing constantly with calls from reporters. Caroline fielded most of them, protecting me as best she could. Boston legal community rocked by Cooper Family Drama read one particularly sensational article. Local television news parked vans outside my apartment building. My parents' home received similar treatment. The district attorney's office released a terse statement. Assistant District Attorney Nathan Cooper has been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal review of potential conflicts of interest. The office has no further comment at this time. Caroline faced criticism from her own family for standing by me. How could you support him turning in his own sister? Her mother demanded during a tense phone call I overheard. Because it was the right thing to do, Caroline replied firmly. And because the man I'm marrying believes in justice even when it's difficult. Her unwavering support was my lifeline during those dark days. Allison's first court appearance was surreal. I sat on the opposite side of the courtroom from my parents, who refused to acknowledge my presence. Allison, dressed conservatively and looking appropriately somber, pleaded not guilty to charges of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in serious bodily injury, reckless driving, and driving under the influence. Her attorney, not the expensive fixer my parents had wanted, but still a respected defense lawyer, suggested during a press conference that I had fabricated evidence against my sister out of long-standing sibling rivalry. The Commonwealth's case relies heavily on testimony from the defendant's estranged brother, who has his own motivations that will be explored at trial, he told reporters on the courthouse steps. The character assassination continued in the press and on social media. Anonymous accounts posted threats and harassment. Old classmates shared stories of perceived slights and grudges, painting me as jealous and vindictive. A few colleagues quietly reached out to offer support, saying they respected my difficult choice. James Harrington sent a brief text. Integrity costs something. That's what makes it valuable. Hang in there. Caroline eventually had to leave town temporarily to escape the media attention that was affecting her work at the hospital. The night after she left, I sat alone in our apartment, questioning everything. Had I made the right choice? Was the professional and personal cost worth it? I had done what I believed was right, but I'd lost my family, possibly my career, and my reputation was in tatters. The weight of it all felt crushing. The ethics investigation at the district attorney's office was thorough and uncomfortable. I sat through hours of questioning about when I learned of Allison's involvement, why I waited to report it, and what actions I had taken in the interim. Did you access any case files related to the Rodriguez investigation before recusing yourself? The internal affairs investigator asked. I made general inquiries about hit-and-run investigations, I admitted. I did not access specific case files or evidence. Did you share information about the investigation with your sister or parents? I told them what I learned through those general inquiries, yes. I acknowledge that was inappropriate. Similar questioning awaited me at the Massachusetts Bar Association, where a separate ethics investigation had been launched. My law license hung in the balance, as I testified about the conflict of interest and my delayed reporting. The media coverage continued unabated, with commentators taking sides in what had become something of a moral referendum. Some outlets portrayed me as a hero prosecutor who placed justice above family loyalty. Others painted me as a cold, calculating betrayer who threw his sister under the bus to advance his career. The promotion I had been all but promised evaporated as the case became too high profile and controversial. Even if the ethics investigations cleared me to return to work, my career trajectory had been fundamentally altered. Meanwhile, Miguel Rodriguez awakened from his coma. Though I couldn't visit him directly due to the ongoing case, I arranged through an anonymous donation to help support his family with medical expenses. His prognosis remained guarded: permanent mobility issues, likely cognitive impairments, months of rehabilitation ahead. My parents released a public statement through their attorney. We are devastated by our son Nathan's actions, which we believe stem from long-standing personal issues. We stand firmly with our daughter Allison, who has our full support during this difficult time. The extended family fractured along predictable lines. My mother's siblings stopped speaking to me entirely. My father's brother, who had always been something of an outsider in the family himself, sent a brief email. Tough situation. Did what you had to do. Give it time. Caroline returned after 2 weeks away, her determination to stand by me unwavering despite the ongoing turmoil. We postponed our wedding plans indefinitely, the celebration no longer appropriate amid the legal proceedings and family division. We'll get married when this is behind us, she assured me. The timing doesn't matter. What we have does. Financial strain became another pressure point. Legal costs mounted even as I remained on paid administrative leave. The down payment fund for our future home dwindled with each passing month. 6 weeks into the investigation, information leaked to the press about my prior knowledge of Allison's involvement, causing renewed scrutiny and public criticism. I suspected my parents, or their attorney, as the source, though I couldn't prove it. The internal investigation at the district attorney's office finally concluded with a formal reprimand for my delayed reporting and conflict of interest violations, but allowed me to return to work. The Bar Association similarly issued a reprimand, but did not suspend my license to practice law. Returning to the office was an exercise in discomfort. Colleagues who had once been friendly now maintained professional distance. I was assigned to minor cases far from the high-profile work I had handled before. Office politics took on a new dimension, as some avoided association with me, while others made performative displays of support. 3 months after her arrest, Allison requested to meet with me privately at the jail where she awaited trial. Against the advice of several colleagues, I agreed. The woman who sat across from me in the visitation room looked different from the sister I had known. The entitled attitude had been replaced by something more subdued and reflective. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I admitted. After an awkward silence, she continued. "I've had a lot of time to think in here, about what I did, about how many lives I destroyed that night." "Including Miguel Rodriguez's," I said pointedly. "Yes," she acknowledged, looking down at her hands, "especially his. I keep seeing his face in my dreams, the moment of impact, the look of surprise before." She trailed off, unable to continue. "Why did you want to see me?" I asked. "To tell you I understand why you did what you did," she replied. "I was wrong. Mom and Dad were wrong. What I did was terrible, and I deserved to be held accountable." Her words seemed genuine, but I had been fooled by Allison's performances before. "What changed?" I asked skeptically. "There's a woman in here," Allison explained, "who killed someone while driving drunk. She's been in prison for 7 years. She talks about living with that guilt every day, about how running away just made everything worse. She wiped at her eyes. I could have been her. I almost was." Our conversation continued for nearly an hour. By the end, I sensed a genuine transformation beginning in my sister. Whether it would last remained to be seen, but it gave me the first glimmer of hope that something positive might eventually emerge from this tragedy. Later that week, I learned my parents had put their house on the market. The legal fees for Allison's defense had depleted their savings and they were downsizing to a condominium. As I worked to rebuild my professional reputation through diligent ethical casework, I found unexpected mentorship from Judge Sandra Montgomery, who had faced a similar ethical dilemma early in her career. The legal community has a long memory, she advised me over coffee, but it also respects moral courage. Give it time. Keep doing good work. This will eventually be a chapter in your story, not the whole book. The first holiday season, completely estranged from my family, was more difficult than I had anticipated. Caroline and I accepted an invitation from her brother to join his family for Thanksgiving, but I felt like an outsider despite their efforts to include me. "Do you regret it?" Caroline asked me late that night, as we lay in bed at her brother's guest room, telling the truth. I considered the question carefully. I regret the pain it's caused. I regret that it came to this point. But no, I don't regret choosing truth over deception. I couldn't have lived with myself otherwise. In January, nearly 6 months after the accident, Miguel Rodriguez's family learned of my identity and role in the case. Elena Rodriguez requested to meet with me through the victim advocate assigned to the case. With some trepidation, I agreed. Our meeting took place in a small conference room at the district attorney's office. Elena brought photographs of Miguel's ongoing rehabilitation efforts. "The doctors say he may walk again with assistance." She told me, her accent thick, but her English clear. "His memory is still problematic, but he knows his children. He smiles when they visit." "I'm so sorry for what my sister did." I said the words, feeling wholly inadequate. Elena studied me carefully. "Many families protect their own even when they do terrible things. You chose differently." She reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. "Miguel and I, we are trying to forgive. It is not easy, but your truth helped us begin that journey." As she left, she turned back. "Your family may not understand now, but someday they might see that your courage was also a kind of love." 1 year after I made the decision to report my sister, my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated. Professionally, I had gradually rebuilt my reputation within the district attorney's office. While I would likely never regain the trajectory I once had, I had found a new path that aligned more authentically with my values. Allison ultimately accepted a plea deal, receiving a 5-year prison sentence with eligibility for parole after 3 years. During her sentencing hearing, she made a full statement, accepting responsibility for her actions. "What I did was inexcusable," she told the court, her voice steady despite her tears. "I made a series of terrible choices that night, and then I tried to escape the consequences, instead of accepting responsibility. Mr. Rodriguez and his family have suffered immensely because of me, and no sentence can undo that harm. I am truly sorry, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." I sat in the back of the courtroom apart from my parents. While they still hadn't fully reconciled with my decision, small cracks had begun to appear in their united front of anger. The most significant development came through a restorative justice program that the court recommended as part of Allison's sentence. With careful preparation and facilitation, a meeting was arranged between Allison and Miguel Rodriguez, who had recovered enough to participate. Though I wasn't present for the meeting, Allison later described it as the most difficult and transformative experience of her life. "He forgave me, Nathan," she said during one of my monthly visits to the prison. "After everything I did to him, after changing his life forever, he looked me in the eye and said, 'He forgives me.' I don't deserve that kind of grace." "Maybe that's the point of grace," I suggested. "It's not about deserving it." My parents' journey toward acceptance of what had happened was slower and more complicated. My mother was the first to reach out with a tentative phone call 6 months after Allison's sentencing. "I still don't fully understand why you couldn't have helped us find another way," she said. "But I've been seeing a therapist who's helping me recognize some patterns in how we've treated you and Allison over the years." It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. Our conversations remained awkward and brief, but the complete silence had broken. Caroline and I finally had our wedding the following fall. It was a smaller, more intimate gathering than we had originally planned, but in many ways more meaningful. Judge Montgomery, who had become something of a mentor to me, officiated the ceremony. My mother attended the wedding alone. My father had declined the invitation. She sat in the back row during the ceremony, but joined us briefly at the reception, making a stilted but sincere effort to connect with Caroline's family. Professionally, I made a significant change, reducing my hours at the district attorney's office to accept an adjunct position teaching legal ethics at Boston University Law School. Sharing the lessons of my experience with the next generation of attorneys gave purpose to the painful journey I had endured. Ethical dilemmas rarely announce themselves with clarity. I told my students during our first class. They creep in disguised as family loyalty, practical necessity, or the path of least resistance. Your integrity is tested not when the choice is clear, but when it tears you apart. My father finally reached out nearly 18 months after Allison's sentencing. He asked to meet me for coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe halfway between his new condominium and my apartment. "I'm not ready to say you were right," he said, after we'd sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. "But I've been visiting Allison regularly, and she's different, more mature, more accountable. She says that wouldn't have happened if she'd gotten away with it." It was the closest thing to an olive branch I could expect, and I accepted it for what it was. Miguel Rodriguez's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. He would never return to his previous job at the hospital, but he had regained limited mobility and was able to participate in family life again. Through the victim advocate, I occasionally received updates on his progress. Caroline and I continued to make anonymous contributions to the trust fund established for his children's education. Perhaps most surprisingly, Allison and I rebuilt our relationship on entirely new terms during her incarceration. Our monthly visits became opportunities for genuine connection rather than the performance of family harmony we had maintained for so many years. "I used to think you were the lucky one," she told me during one visit. "Now I realize you just made better choices over and over again, even when it was hard." She used her time in prison productively, earning a degree through a correspondence program and volunteering for every rehabilitation opportunity available. Her letters showed genuine growth and an emerging sense of purpose. "When I get out, I want to speak to high school students about drunk driving," she wrote, "about taking responsibility for your actions, about how one bad decision can change so many lives." My parents also slowly evolved attending therapy to address their enabling patterns. My father admitted during one difficult family session that he had always favored Allison because she reminded him of himself at the same age. "I saw my own weaknesses in her," he confessed. "I thought I was protecting her, but I was just making sure she never had to grow up." Nearly 2 years after that fateful night, Caroline and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Eleanor, after my law school ethics professor. As I held my newborn daughter, I made a silent promise to parent differently than I had been parented, to teach accountability, alongside love, to value integrity over comfort. The legal community gradually came to recognize my actions as a difficult ethical stand, rather than a betrayal. An article in the Massachusetts Bar Journal discussed the case as an example of moral courage in the legal profession, helping to restore my professional reputation. On the 3rd anniversary of the accident, we had the first complete family dinner since everything had fallen apart. Allison had been released on parole 2 months earlier and was living in a halfway house while working as an administrative assistant at a substance abuse treatment center. The conversation was tentative at first, with carefully neutral topics dominating the first hour. But gradually, as the evening progressed, moments of genuine connection emerged. My father asked thoughtful questions about my teaching position. My mother cooed over photos of Eleanor. Allison shared her experiences speaking to student groups about the consequences of drunk driving. Nothing would ever erase the trauma and division we had experienced. Miguel Rodriguez would never fully recover from his injuries. My relationship with my parents would always carry the scars of their initial reaction. But something new and potentially stronger was slowly taking the place of what had been lost. A family built on truth rather than denial, on accountability rather than enablement. As we finished dinner, Allison raised her glass of water in a toast. To difficult truths, she said quietly, and the courage to face them. Later that night, as Caroline and I drove home, she asked me a question I had considered many times over the years. If you could go back to that first night, would you do anything differently? I thought about it carefully before answering. I would have reported what I knew immediately without the delay. The longer I waited, the harder it became and the more damage was done. But you wouldn't change your ultimate decision. No, I said with certainty. Some principles aren't negotiable even for family, especially for family. Sometimes the truest form of love is holding people accountable for their actions. The journey had cost me dearly, but it had also given me something precious, the knowledge that when tested, my integrity had remained intact. That knowledge would be the foundation upon which I would build the rest of my life and the most important legacy I could leave my daughter. Have you ever faced a moment where doing the right thing meant potentially losing people you care about? What did you choose and how did it change you? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey from destruction to rebuilding, and I hope it gives strength to anyone facing their own difficult moral choices today.